A discarded wife, rain in her hair, a suitcase on the curb, a door slams, a label sticks. Infertile. She runs into the wrong lounge, owned by the most dangerous man in the city. He offers one night of safety, no questions. But a storm hits, alarms scream, and she sees what he really is, lethal to everyone, gentle only to her. 48 hours later, 2 lines change everything. The secret? The infertile lie wasn't hers. Someone fed it to control her body and steal her life. Now the press circles, hired muscle hunts, and a traitor inside his crew sells her location. He can end empires with a phone call, or burn the city for her. If he destroys her ex's world, does he save her or make her the target of a war? When the truth detonates, will a vow of "you're mine" be protection, or the price of forever? The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the pristine, hardwood floors of Caleb's penthouse. Maeve blinked awake slowly, her body sinking into the plush guest bed that had cradled her through a dreamless sleep. For the first time in months, her chest didn't feel tight with anxiety. She sat up, taking in the minimalist luxury around her. The room was done in shades of gray and cream, with subtle touches of dark blue in the accent pillows and throw blanket she'd wrapped herself in. Everything about the space spoke of careful consideration rather than showy wealth. Her fingers traced the soft cotton sheets, a far cry from the silk ones Grant insisted on for appearance's sake. The thought of him sent a familiar ripple of tension through her shoulders. But here, in this quiet sanctuary, even that felt distant. Padding to the en-suite bathroom, Maeve found fresh towels and basic toiletries, arranged with hotel-like precision. The mirror reflected back a woman she barely recognized. Her designer clothes rumpled from sleep, her carefully maintained honey-blonde hair a mess of waves. But her eyes looked clearer than they had in years. The shower's pressure was perfect, washing away the lingering chill of last night's rain. She used the provided shampoo, noting its clean, masculine scent. As steam filled the spacious bathroom, Maeve allowed herself a deep breath, then another. The knot in her chest that had been her constant companion began to loosen. After drying off, she slipped back into yesterday's clothes, a cashmere sweater and tailored pants that Grant had approved of. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent years dressing for his satisfaction, curating an image of the perfect corporate wife. The clinic note in her purse seemed to pulse like a beacon. She'd read it so many times she had memorized every word, every damning piece of evidence that proved Grant's elaborate lie. The fertility issues had never been hers. The treatments, the scheduled appointments, the carefully timed interventions. All of it had been a smokescreen to keep her dependent, controlled. Moving through the penthouse, Maeve absorbed details she'd missed in last night's emotional haze. The space was massive, but not ostentatious. Clean lines and dark woods created an atmosphere of understated power. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined one wall, filled with everything from classic literature to what looked like military strategy texts. The kitchen was a chef's dream, in black granite and stainless steel. On the counter, she found a handwritten note next to a French press filled with fresh coffee. "Help yourself to breakfast. Fresh bread in the bread box, eggs and fruit in the fridge. I'm downstairs if you need anything." C. The simple thoughtfulness of it made her throat tight. When was the last time someone had offered her kindness without agenda? She poured herself coffee, its rich aroma filling her lungs as she wandered to the windows. The city spread out below, already humming with morning energy. From this height, everything looked small, manageable. Even the problems that had seemed insurmountable last night felt different in the clear morning light. Her phone lay face down on the coffee table where she'd left it. Dozens of missed calls and messages from Grant, she was sure. The thought of checking them made her stomach clench. But the fear felt different now. Less paralyzing. More like fuel for the anger she'd suppressed for so long. Moving to the kitchen island, Maeve pulled out her laptop and opened her email. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she considered her next move. The fertility clinic note wasn't the only documentation she had. There were years of paperwork, carefully filed away, evidence of Grant's systematic gaslighting and control. She thought of Caleb's quiet offer of safety last night. No demands, no questions, just space to breathe and think. The contrast between his approach and Grant's manipulations was stark. The morning sun continued its slow crawl across the hardwood floors as Maeve began to type. Each word felt like picking a lock, opening doors she'd thought permanently closed. She documented everything. The fake fertility treatments, the controlled accounts, the isolation from friends and family. The words flowed easier with each passing minute. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh coffee and possibility through the open windows. Traffic sounds drifted up from far below, but they felt distant, unimportant. In this moment, in this space, Maeve felt truly present for the first time in years. She paused her typing to pour another cup of coffee, noting how steady her hands were. The woman who had stumbled into Caleb's lounge last night, shaking and desperate, felt like a different person. Something had shifted during those dark hours between then and now. Something fundamental. The clinic note lay on the counter beside her laptop, its official letterhead stark against the dark granite. She didn't need to read it again. Its truth had already done its work, cracking the foundation of lies she'd been living on. Now, in the calm of morning, she could begin to build something new on those ruins. The clock on the wall read 7:45 a.m. 15 minutes of clear thinking had given her more clarity than years of confusion. She took another deep breath, feeling her lungs expand fully, without the weight of pretense and performance pressing down on them. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, warming Maeve's face as she stirred on the plush sofa. The Italian linen draped over her shoulders whispered against her skin as she oriented herself. For a moment, the unfamiliar surroundings made her pulse quicken, until the events of last night filtered back through the morning haze. The scent of fresh coffee and something savory drew her attention to the open kitchen. Caleb moved with quiet precision between stovetop and counter. His black shirt rolled at the sleeves, revealing strong forearms as he worked. The domestic scene felt surreal after the chaos of the previous evening. "Good morning," he said, without turning, his voice carrying easily across the space. "There's coffee if you'd like some." Maeve sat up slowly, smoothing her rumpled clothes. "Thank you. For everything." He glanced over his shoulder, dark eyes assessing but not intrusive. "Hungry?" She nodded, padding toward the kitchen island. The marble was cool under her palms as she settled onto a bar stool. Caleb placed a steaming mug before her, then returned to the stove, where eggs sizzled in a pan. "I should explain about last night," Maeve began carefully, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. "Only if you want to." He kept his focus on cooking, giving her space to find her words. She traced the rim of her mug, considering how to frame her story without revealing too much. "My husband, he's very concerned with appearances. Everything has to be perfect, controlled." The coffee's rich aroma steadied her as memories surfaced. "For years, he convinced me I was infertile, built this whole narrative around it." Caleb slid a plate of perfectly scrambled eggs in front of her, his movements deliberately slow. She noticed how he telegraphed each action, maintaining distance without making it obvious. "Yesterday, I found proof it was all lies." Her voice caught. "When I confronted him, he locked me out, changed all the codes remotely." Caleb leaned against the counter opposite her, his posture relaxed but alert. His gaze flickered to her left hand, where the indent from her wedding rings was still visible, slightly bruised from how tightly they'd fit. She caught the micro-expression that crossed his face, something between concern and carefully contained anger. A car horn blared from the street below, and Maeve flinched before she could stop herself. Caleb noticed but didn't comment. "I have a proposition," he said instead, reaching for his own coffee. "The guest suite is yours for 72 hours if you want it. No strings, no expectations. I can have my concierge bring whatever you need. Clothes, toiletries. There's a secure phone you can use with a new number." Maeve's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "That's very generous, but I couldn't." A knock at the door interrupted her refusal. A man entered, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with military precision. His expression was professionally neutral as he approached Caleb. "Boss," he said quietly, holding out a tablet. "Live feed 3 doors down." Caleb studied the screen, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. He turned the tablet so Maeve could see. Her stomach dropped. The black SUV was unmistakable, tinted windows, chrome accents, the same vehicle Grant's security team always used. Even from the grainy footage, she recognized Marcus's silhouette behind the wheel. "They've been there 20 minutes, the man, presumably security, reported. "Thank you, Rocco," Caleb said, taking back the tablet. "Keep monitoring." Rocco nodded and withdrew as silently as he'd entered. Maeve's eggs turned to ash in her mouth. "The offer stands," Caleb said softly. 3 days to figure out your next move, with one addition." He set his mug down deliberately. "You have complete control over who touches you and when. No exceptions. Anyone who violates that answers to me personally." the weight of his words settled around her like a shield. She studied his face, looking for hidden angles, ulterior motives, found none. "I need to set some boundaries," she said finally. "No intimacy, no pressure." "Agreed." His response was immediate, unequivocal. Then, "Yes, thank you." Caleb nodded once. "Rocco will bring up your suitcase. The guest suite has its own bathroom and a small office if you need workspace." Maeve followed him down a hallway, noting security cameras discreetly placed at intervals. The guest suite was larger than her first apartment, all cream and gray tones, with its own sitting area and a view of the city. "The elevator requires a key card after hours," Caleb explained, producing a small black card. "This one's coded to all internal floors. The building has backup generators if needed." He demonstrated the card reader by the door. "You can come and go as you please, but I'd appreciate knowing if you leave the building. For security reasons." She accepted the card, their fingers not quite touching in the exchange. "Of course." "I'll have Rocco bring up some takeout menus later. Kitchen's always open if you prefer to cook." He stepped back, maintaining the careful distance he'd kept all morning. "Make yourself at home." The clock on the bedside table read 10:15 a.m. as Caleb left her to settle in. Maeve sat on the edge of the bed, running her fingers over the keycard's smooth surface. Outside her window, the city stretched endlessly, buildings reflecting morning sun like mirrors. Somewhere in that maze of steel and glass, Grant was surely already planning his next move. But for the first time in years, Maeve had space to breathe, to think, to plan, and most importantly, to fight back. The storm hit like a hammer against glass. Lightning split the darkening sky, illuminating Maeve's temporary sanctuary in harsh bursts. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the guest suite, watching the city disappear behind sheets of rain. A flicker, then darkness. The backup generators hummed to life seconds later, bathing the penthouse in soft emergency lighting. Maeve wrapped her arms around herself, grateful for the heat that still pumped through the vents. A soft tap at her door made her turn. "Come in!" Caleb entered, keeping the door wide open. "Everything okay up here?" Before she could answer, a drop of water landed on her shoulder, then another. They both looked up at the spreading damp spot on the ceiling. "Well, that's not ideal," Caleb said, frowning. He stepped closer, examining the seam where water was beginning to seep through. This section of the roof was scheduled for maintenance next week. A small stream now trickled onto the bed, the expensive mattress already developing a dark stain. Maeve moved to salvage her suitcase from the spreading puddle. "I can call maintenance," Caleb offered. "But with the storm—" "It's fine," Maeve said quickly. "I'll take the sofa downstairs." "You'll freeze. The backup power prioritizes security systems over climate control." He hesitated. "My room has a separate environmental system and a very large bed." Maeve stiffened. He immediately added, "I can take the office couch." "No," she said, surprising herself. I trust you, but I need rules." His expression remained carefully neutral. "Name them." "I take the left side, no touching unless I specifically ask, and—" She took a deep breath. "No talking about my marriage, just for tonight." "Agreed." He gestured to a shopping bag by the door. The concierge dropped these off earlier. Might be more comfortable than wet clothes. Maeve peeked inside. Soft pajamas, practical underwear, nothing suggestive. She appreciated the thoughtfulness. "I'll give you some privacy to change," Caleb said, already moving toward the door. "Come down when you're ready." 20 minutes later, Maeve padded down the hallway in new silk pajamas and bare feet. She found Caleb in the kitchen, setting up emergency lanterns. "Power's out across 6 blocks, he reported, handing her a flashlight. "Might be a while before they restore it." Thunder cracked overhead, making the windows rattle. In the strange half-light, Caleb looked softer somehow, his usual sharp edges blurred. He'd change into dark sleep pants and a fitted t-shirt that did nothing to hide his muscled frame. "Tell me something true," Maeve said suddenly, "something that has nothing to do with all this." Caleb considered her request as they walked to his bedroom. The space was minimalist but luxurious. Charcoal walls, crisp white bedding, abstract art in muted colors. "I don't sleep much," he admitted, setting a lantern on the nightstand. "It's easier to keep the city afraid than to face what I've lost." The raw honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "Your turn," he said softly. "Something true." Maeve settled on the left side of the bed, drawing her knees up. "I wanted a family more than anything. Still do. The kind where everyone comes home for Sunday dinner and holidays are chaos, and there's always room for one more at the table. That's a good dream. His voice was gentle. They talked like that for hours, trading simple truths in the storm-dark room. Caleb spoke about his favorite coffee shop that didn't know who he was. Maeve described the garden she'd planned but never planted. Small things, safe things, but each revelation felt intimate in the shadows. Lightning illuminated the room in stuttering snapshots. Caleb's profile as he laughed at her terrible joke, the careful space between their bodies, the way his hands stayed deliberately still when she shifted closer. "Another truth," Maeve whispered. "I haven't felt safe in years, until tonight." The confession hung between them like smoke. Caleb turned his head to look at her, his eyes dark and intent. "I want to keep you safe," he said roughly. "But I need you to be sure about anything that happens between us." Maeve studied him in the dim light. The power dynamics were clear. He was dangerous, connected, capable of violence. But he'd given her every choice, respected every boundary, and now he was waiting, perfectly still, letting her decide. She leaned across the careful inch between them and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, questioning. His hand hovered near her face but didn't touch until she guided it to her cheek. When she pulled back, his breathing was uneven. "That's all for tonight," she whispered. He nodded, accepting her limits without question. They settled back against their pillows, not touching, but close enough to share warmth. The storm was moving past now, thunder growing distant. Maeve felt sleep tugging at her edges, safer than she'd been in longer than she could remember. "Thank you," she murmured into the dark, not sure if he was still awake. His breathing stayed steady beside her as the clock ticked toward midnight, the storm fading to gentle rain against the windows. For the first time in months, Maeve felt something like hope unfurling in her chest. The city sparkled below them, a constellation of emergency lights and distant sirens. But here in this room, in this moment, there was only the sound of shared breathing and the sense that something new was taking root in the spaces between their careful words and controlled touches. Thunder rumbled one last time, far away now. Maeve let her eyes close, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for now she had this, a safe harbor in the storm, a man who gave her choices, and the freedom to decide what came next. The rain gentled to a whisper against the glass. In the soft darkness, two people who had lost too much began to find something unexpected. Trust, building slowly in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. The security glass hummed, a low vibration that made Maeve's skin prickle. She sat up in bed just as Caleb's hand shot out to the biometric nightstand. Movement fluid and practiced. "Stay behind me," he ordered. Voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. The gun appeared in his grip like it had materialized from shadow. His other hand reached for a small comm unit. "Rocco, South Corridor, 3 targets." Maeve's heart hammered as she slid from the bed, pressing close to Caleb's back. His body was coiled tension, every muscle ready to unleash violence. The darkness felt alive with threat. Through the bedroom's reinforced door, they heard the whisper of boot steps. Caleb's breathing stayed measured, controlled. He backed them toward the ensuite bathroom, maintaining clear lines of sight to both entry points. "On my mark," he murmured into the comm. The first attacker never made it through the doorway. Rocco materialized from the shadows like an avenging spirit, taking the man down with brutal efficiency. The second intruder managed 2 steps before Caleb's bullet found his shoulder, a precise shot meant to disable rather than kill. The third man pulled a weapon, but Caleb was faster. 1 shot, 1 fall, 1 more body on expensive flooring. The entire confrontation lasted less than 30 seconds. Maeve pressed a hand to her mouth, tasting copper where she'd bitten her lip. The violence should have terrified her. Instead, she felt a strange calm watching Caleb move through the aftermath with lethal grace. Rocco zip-tied the survivors, methodically searching their gear. When he ripped a patch from one jacket, Maeve's stomach lurched. The familiar crest, a stylized W wrapped in laurels, marked these men as Grant's private security team. "He sent them to drag me back," she whispered. The truth hit her like a physical blow. Grant hadn't just locked her out. He'd sent armed men to retrieve her like lost property. Caleb holstered his weapon and turned to her, eyes dark with controlled fury. "Pack what you need. We're moving you before dawn." "Moving me?" "Safe house, 2 neighborhoods over, more secure than here." His thumb brushed her cheek, surprisingly gentle for hands that had just dealt such violence. You're in my world now. In my world, no one throws you away. Maeve looked at the blood seeping into imported carpet, at the military-grade gear the intruders wore, at Rocco efficiently documenting evidence before disposal. This was Caleb's world, a place of constant vigilance, of power maintained through calculated violence. I need you to sign these, Caleb said, producing papers from his office. Temporary alias for building records, legal protection. Her hand shook as she signed the forms. Julia Chen, the paperwork claimed. A ghost identity to keep her safe. While Rocco's team cleared the scene, Caleb helped her pack the few belongings she'd accumulated. His movements were precise, efficient, but he kept finding excuses to touch her, steadying her elbow, brushing hair from her face, resting a hand at the small of her back. The private elevator arrived silently. Inside, Maeve studied their reflection in polished steel, her in borrowed silk pajamas, him in sleep pants and a gun holster, both of them caught between worlds. I can't go back, she said softly. No. His voice was granite. You can't. The safe house was a fortress disguised as a luxury condo. Reinforced windows, multiple escape routes, security that would shame most military installations. Maeve cataloged the features, with growing understanding of just how dangerous Caleb's world truly was. He led her through the space, pointing out panic buttons and weapon caches with the same care he'd shown bringing her tea that first night. When they reached the master suite, he hesitated. Guest room's yours if you want it. Or, he let the offer hang unspoken. Maeve thought about the precision of his violence, the control in every movement. She thought about how that same control meant he'd never once touched her without permission, never pushed past her boundaries. We should stay together, she said. Safer. His smile held equal parts relief and promise. The door sealed behind them with multiple locks engaging. Maeve stared at the reinforced hinges, the blast-proof frame. In the soft pre-dawn light, she could almost pretend this was normal, just two people seeking shelter from a storm. But normal had ended the moment Grant shoved her out of that car. Normal wasn't the weight of a gun in Caleb's hands or the way Rocco's team erased all evidence of violence. Normal wasn't hiding behind aliases and reinforced doors. Caleb's world was blood and shadows, power and protection. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something dangerously close to belonging. He moved through the space with familiar ease, checking sightlines and testing communications. Every gesture screamed predator, yet his touch remained gentle when he guided her away from windows. Try to rest, he said. We'll handle everything else after sunrise. Maeve nodded, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline crash hit hard, making her limbs heavy. She sank onto the bed, watching Caleb perform one final security sweep. This was her life now. Reinforced doors and careful aliases, a dangerous man's protection and the price that came with it. She should have felt trapped. Instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Freedom. The clock read 2:04 a.m. as the last lock engaged. Maeve stared at those reinforced hinges, understanding they represented both prison and liberation. In Caleb's world, safety came with steel and surveillance, blood and bullets. But it also came with choice, with respect, with a man who killed without hesitation but wouldn't touch her without permission. A man who looked at her and saw something worth protecting, worth fighting for. The hinges gleamed in the low light, a promise of security bought with violence. Maeve traced their edges with tired fingers, accepting what they represented. She couldn't go back to her old life. But maybe, just maybe, she could build something new in this world of shadows and steel. Sunlight streamed through reinforced windows as Maeve sat at the kitchen island, yellow legal pad before her. The pen felt heavy in her hand, but her writing was steady. No touching unless I initiate it, she read aloud, watching Caleb's face. He nodded, taking the pen to sign beneath her words. Your body, your rules, he said simply. No using me as bait against Grant or anyone else. Another signature. Never. I keep a personal phone at all times with unrestricted access. His signature followed without hesitation. The morning light caught the angles of his face as he leaned over the counter, pushing a fresh cup of coffee toward her. The domestic gesture felt surreal against the backdrop of last night's violence. Molly Quinn arrived at 9, laptop bag slung over her shoulder, pink hair a beacon against the safe house's muted tones. Her fingers flew across keys as she worked on porting Maeve's number to a secure device. Grant's people are good, Molly said, not looking up from her screen. But I'm better. They won't trace this. Maeve watched the hacker work, grateful for another woman's presence in this masculine fortress. Molly's casual competence was reassuring. Here was someone who clearly trusted Caleb while maintaining her own independence. The private physician arrived next, a Dr. Chen with kind eyes and gentle hands. She documented everything with clinical precision: old bruises, stress-induced weight loss, and the long-acting contraceptive Grant had insisted upon. Per spouse insistence, Maeve managed, her voice cracking on the words. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he remained by the door, respecting her space. The examination confirmed what Maeve had known. She was healthy, capable of bearing children. The infertility had been another of Grant's carefully constructed lies. Lunch arrived from a discreet catering service: simple sandwiches, fresh fruit, bottles of water. Maeve ate mechanically, watching Caleb coordinate security through text messages. His world ran on precise timing and careful control, yet he kept signing away that control wherever she asked. The afternoon stretched out, filled with practical details. New clothes delivered, security protocols explained, safe routes memorized. Through it all, the tension between them built like a gathering storm. By 4 o'clock, Maeve couldn't stop watching his hands, the same hands that had dealt death hours ago, now carefully maintaining distance she'd requested. The contradiction fascinated her. "Kiss me," she said suddenly, breaking the professional rhythm of the day. Caleb went still, studying her face. "You're sure?" "Yes." She stepped closer. "Keep kissing me until I can't hear his voice in my head anymore." He moved slowly, telegraphing each motion. The first kiss was gentle, questioning. When she pressed closer, his control fractured slightly, enough to let her feel the want beneath his careful restraint. "More," she whispered against his mouth. They made it to the bedroom in stages, stopping whenever she needed to breathe or process. He kept all doors open, lights soft enough for comfort but bright enough for clarity. "We stop the instant you want to," he said, hands hovering above her skin. "I know." She guided his touch where she wanted it. "I trust you." Their first time was slow, deliberate, Maeve setting the pace, Caleb following her lead with devastating attention to detail. When she rolled him onto his back, taking control completely, his groan held something like reverence. "You're not broken," he told her after, tracing patterns on her shoulder. "You never were." She touched the scars on his chest, marks of violence survived. "You're not only destruction," she replied. "You never were." The second time was faster, more urgent, Maeve chasing sensation instead of running from memory. Caleb's control slipped further, but never completely. Even lost in pleasure, he watched her responses with hawk-like focus. Rain started falling as they lay tangled in sheets, her head on his chest, his fingers combing through her hair. The steady rhythm against the windows matched their slowing heartbeats. "Thank you," she murmured. "For what?" "For letting me choose. For signing my rules, for—" She gestured at their position. "This." His arm tightened around her. "Always." The rain intensified, drumming against bullet-resistant glass. In any other context, it would have been romantic. Soft lighting, tangled sheets, gentle touches in the dark. But romance wasn't quite the right word for this. A woman reclaiming her autonomy. A violent man yielding control, both of them finding something unexpected in the space between. Maeve's eyes grew heavy as midnight approached. She fought sleep, wanting to preserve this moment. Safety, choice, pleasure, without price tags attached. "Rest," Caleb murmured, pulling the covers higher. "I've got watch." She smiled at the military phrasing, at how it perfectly encapsulated him. The protector, the warrior, the man who signed away his power because she asked. The clock read 12:40 as she finally drifted off, lulled by rain and heartbeat and the strange peace of being truly safe for the first time in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now she had this. Her rules, her choices, her pleasure, freely given and received. Caleb stayed awake, one hand on her back, the other near his phone. Even in this intimate moment, he remained vigilant. But his touch was soft, his breathing steady, his protection offered without demands. Outside, the rain continued falling on a city that never truly slept. Inside, in a fortress built for war but serving now as sanctuary, two people found healing in each other's careful trust. Molly burst through the door at 7 sharp, her laptop clutched to her chest, dark circles under her eyes, betraying an all-night data dive. She barely waited for Caleb to lower his coffee cup before launching in. "You need to see this, both of you!" Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up scanned documents. The clinic records, I went through everything. That infertility diagnosis isn't a diagnosis at all. Maeve leaned forward, squinting at the screen. There, in sterile medical shorthand, was a billing note. Patient reports spouse insists on barring conception, hormone suppression provided at spouse request. She read it once, twice, a third time. Her stomach lurched, then clenched with fury, before finally settling into a strange, hollow relief. Years of shame and self-doubt evaporated in those few clinical words. Her voice cracked. He made them. He had them chemically suppress your fertility while telling you were infertile, Molly finished, her usual playful tone hardened to steel. Classic gaslighting, make you doubt your own body, your own reality. A muscle ticked in Caleb's jaw. His fingers whitened around his coffee cup before he set it down with careful precision. How long? The suppression treatment started 3 months after their marriage, Molly said, scrolling through records. Regular injections, all billed directly to Grant's personal account, not their shared insurance. And there's more. Molly pulled up another window filled with trust documents. I did some digging into why he'd go to such lengths. Your grandmother, your father's mother, left you a trust that's been dormant since her death. Inside that trust, controlling interest in Atlantic Shore shipping. Maeve's breath caught. The company Grant's been trying to acquire. The very same. Molly's fingers danced across the keyboard. And here's where it gets interesting. That shipping company? It's been laundering money for the Cortez cartel for years. Clean boats on paper, dirty cash in reality. If Grant gets control, Maeve started. He gets a direct line to Cortez's operation, Caleb finished, voice dangerously soft. And you were the only thing standing in his way. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The rushed courtship, the insistence on handling all their paperwork, the careful isolation from her family's business interests, the infertility that kept her dependent and ashamed. My whole marriage was a setup. Maeve's voice shook. A cage made of paper and lies. Caleb moved with that liquid grace that made him so lethal, but instead of rising to his full height, he dropped to one knee beside her chair, not in supplication, but in focused attention, bringing himself to her eye level. Say what you want, he said simply. Whatever you need, it's yours. Maeve's mind raced through possibilities. I want proof. Hard evidence of everything. The clinic records, the trust documents, the money laundering. I want leverage that can't be buried or denied. She straightened in her chair. And I want my life back. Molly? Caleb didn't look away from Maeve's face. Already compiling. Molly's typing speed doubled. I'm creating 3 separate secure archives. One for legal proof, one for personal documentation, and one for... She grinned sharply. Insurance. Good. Caleb stood, already reaching for his phone. Rocco, double the exterior teams. Full surveillance sweep, especially around the clinic. Yes. Now. Maeve watched him work, seeing new layers to his efficiency. This wasn't just protection anymore. This was the beginning of a strategic dismantling. I'll start a quiet audit of Atlantic Shore's book, he said, typing rapid commands. We'll need clean proof of the laundering before we move. I can help with that, Maeve said. I may not have practiced law, but I know how to read between lines and shipping manifests. Your grandmother taught you well, Molly commented, still typing. The trust documents show she was trying to clean up Atlantic Shore before she died. Maybe that's why. Why Grant targeted me specifically, Maeve finished. A convenient way to get both me and the company under his control. Caleb's phone buzzed with incoming reports. He read quickly, jaw tightening. Rocco's teams are in place. We'll know if anyone so much as looks at those clinic records wrong. Maeve stood, needing to move. The safe house suddenly felt both too small and too exposed. How long until we have enough proof? For the clinic records, we already do, Molly said. For the money laundering, that'll take more time. We need to be thorough. And safe, Caleb added. Grant's not stupid. He'll notice if too many people start asking questions about Atlantic Shore. Maeve paced the length of the kitchen, mind working. So we need to be subtle. Come at it from angles he won't expect. She stopped, turning to face them both. He thinks I'm broken. Use that. Let him think he's winning while we gather proof. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Caleb's face. Playing wounded while we set the trap. I like it. It's risky, Molly warned. If he realizes we're investigating. He won't, Maeve said firmly. He's too convinced of his own cleverness. Too sure I'm exactly what he made me. Weak, dependent, easily controlled. His mistake, Caleb said softly, deadly pride in his voice. The clock on the wall read 9:30. Outside, Rocco's teams moved into position, invisible guardians around the clinic and safe house. Inside, Molly's fingers flew across keyboards, building digital fortresses around their growing evidence. And Maeve stood in the center of it all, feeling strength return with every passing moment. The shame and doubt of years was burning away, replaced by clear-eyed purpose. She wasn't broken. She never had been. Grant had built her cage carefully, brick by brick. Of lies and manipulation, now she would take it apart just as carefully, using his own weapons against him. 10,000 for information, 50 for delivery. Molly's voice was tight as she read the bounty notice. They're flooding every street contact, every underground channel. Maeve's hands curled into fists on the safe house kitchen counter. Outside, afternoon sun glinted off wet pavement, deceptively peaceful. Inside, her mind raced with implications. We can't just wait for them to find me, she said. The shipping records. If we could prove the laundering connection between Atlantic Shore and Cortez. No. Caleb's response was immediate, final. Too exposed. I can help, Maeve insisted. I know those manifests better than anyone. Grant never thought I paid attention during his boardroom calls, but I documented everything. It's too dangerous. Caleb moved closer, protective instinct radiating from every line of his body. We'll find another way. Guys, Molly's voice cut through their tension. We have a bigger problem. Her laptop screen showed a legal filing, fresh from the court system. Grant just scheduled an emergency board session, 48 hours from now. Maeve leaned in, scanning the document. Her breath caught. He's using an abandonment clause. That's not even... I never abandoned anything. He locked me out. Doesn't matter, Molly said grimly. Once he transfers trust access, he'll have control of Atlantic Shore. The paper trail will be technically legal. Unless we catch him admitting the truth. Maeve straightened, mind clicking into strategic gear. The river terminal, the old Atlantic Shore loading dock, it's isolated, controlled sightlines. No. Caleb's voice dropped dangerously low. Absolutely not. Listen to me, Maeve pressed. We set up a controlled meeting. Make him think I'm willing to negotiate surrender of the trust. Get him to admit what he did with the clinic records, with the laundering. While wearing a wire, Molly added, catching on. I can set up a dead drop server, stream everything live. Stop! Caleb's command froze them both. This isn't a game. If something goes wrong, then make sure it doesn't. Maeve met his gaze steadily. Your teams can surround the terminal. 4 angles of coverage, clear shots if needed, Molly monitoring everything. Me wearing both wire and tracker. It's too risky. It's my choice. Maeve stepped closer, refusing to back down. I won't spend my life hiding like something shameful. I won't let him keep using me as his puppet. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken fears. Finally, Caleb turned to Molly. How fast can you set up the dead drop? 2 hours for the server, another hour for testing the stream. Molly was already typing. I can bounce it through enough proxies to make it untraceable. And the wire? Maeve asked. Newest model. Molly pulled equipment from her bag. Subdermal comm bead, virtually undetectable. Records. Everything within 15 feet? Caleb's jaw worked as he studied the terminal's blueprints. 4 teams. Here, 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 and high cover from the crane housing. No blind spots. I'll need a reason to be there, Maeve said. Something believable. Your grandmother's original trust papers, Molly suggested. Tell him you'll trade them for immunity from the abandonment clause. He'll want those destroyed anyway. Good. Caleb traced evacuation routes on the blueprint. Rocco's team takes north approach, Martinez east, Chen west. I'll hold south with direct line of sight. And I'll be in the van with tech support, Molly added. 300 yards out monitoring everything. Maeve's hands shook slightly as she picked up the comm bead. How do we test it? Practice run first. Molly set up a laptop. We need your voice patterns clear and calm. No matter what happens in there, you have to sound controlled. The next hours blurred into preparation. Maeve memorized code words, practiced variations of the handoff dialogue. Each time her voice wavered, she started again, forcing steel into her spine. The papers are clean, she recited. Original trust documents, everything you need. Just call off the board meeting. Good, Molly encouraged. Now the backup phrase if you feel threatened. My grandmother would be disappointed in what you've done with her legacy. Perfect. That triggers immediate breach response from all teams. Caleb worked the phones, positioning his people with precision that spoke of years of practice. Every few minutes, his gaze would find Maeve, checking for signs of doubt. But Maeve kept working. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. This was her life, her choice, her chance to reclaim everything Grant had stolen. At 7:30, Molly did final checks on the equipment. Combeat is reading clear. Dead drop server is secure. Video feeds are synced from all angles. Teams are in position, Caleb reported, standing by for equipment test. Maeve stood still as Molly attached the tiny comm bead behind her ear. The subdermal adhesive felt strange, a constant reminder of what was coming. Testing, testing, she said clearly. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Crystal clear, Molly adjusted levels. Now move around, let's check for interference. Maeve paced the safe house, repeating her lines. I have what you want, just call off the board meeting, the papers are clean. Caleb approached silently, reaching up to adjust the comm bead's position. His thumb brushed her jaw, so gentle it made her throat tight. You don't have to do this, he said softly. Maeve leaned into his touch for just a moment. Yes, I do. I need to face him. On my terms this time. The clock on the wall read 8 p.m. In 2.5 hours, they would be at the terminal. In 2.5 hours, everything would change. Again, Maeve said firmly, stepping back. Let me run the handoff lines again. She spoke into the mic, voice growing stronger with each repetition. Caleb's thumb stayed at her jaw, adjusting the comm bead with infinite care, his touch a reminder that she wasn't alone anymore. Outside, the sun set over the city that had seen her broken. Tonight, she would begin putting herself back together. Fog rolled off the river in thick waves, turning the terminal's floodlights into hazy globes. Metal groaned beneath Maeve's feet as she crossed the loading dock, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Through her comm, she heard Caleb's steady breathing, felt the invisible web of his teams surrounding her. The meeting point was a cleared space between stacked shipping containers lit by a single overhead lamp. Grant's messenger arrived first, a man Maeve had never seen before, wearing an expensive suit that screamed, Whitaker, firm. Mrs. Whitaker, he said smoothly, the papers. When I see Grant. Her voice stayed level just as they'd practiced. Movement caught her eye, a shadow where there shouldn't be one, high up on a container stack. Something metallic glinted. The messenger's phone buzzed. Mr. Whitaker is joining virtually. He held up the screen, showing Grant's face. Maeve. Grant's smile was razor sharp. Come home. This rebellious phase is beneath you. The papers are clean, she recited, forcing her hands not to shake. Original trust documents. Call off the board meeting. More movement above. Wrong angle for Caleb's teams. Show me, Grant demanded. She reached for her bag, and everything exploded. The glint became a muzzle flash. A shot cracked through the fog, aimed not at her, but at the darker shadow she knew was Caleb. Pure instinct took over. Maeve grabbed the lid off a nearby equipment crate and swung it up. The bullet pinged off metal with a sound like a struck bell. That half-second of deflection was all Rocco needed. His return shot was precise, clinical. The rival gunman stumbled, weapon clattering down. Contact north! Rocco's voice cut through her comm. Second shooter moving east! Chaos erupted. Grant's messenger bolted. Sirens wailed in the distance. Through the fog came shouts, running feet, more gunshots. Maeve felt Caleb's hand close around her arm, pulling her behind a stack of wooden pallets. Site secure, Martinez reported. 2 shooters down, 1 in custody, no escapees. Sweep it again, Caleb ordered. His voice was controlled, but his hands, still gripping Maeve's arms, were shaking. She'd never seen him anything less than perfectly steady before. The tremor in his fingers shocked her more than the gunfire had. Caleb! He wouldn't look at her, jaw clenched tight. I saw the shooter too late, 5 seconds earlier, and... He broke off, hands tightening. But you did see him? Maeve said softly. I'm okay. We're okay. 7 years ago, I was 5 minutes too late. The words seemed torn from him. My mother? My sister? A rival family wanted to send a message. I saw the signs, but I moved too slow. By the time I got there, his breath hitched. I swore, never again, never fucking again. Understanding crashed through her. This controlled, lethal man had been shaped by loss just as she had. But where her wounds were fresh, his had hardened into armor. Maeve lifted her hands to his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. Then don't be slow with me, she whispered. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. His eyes finally met hers, dark with something raw and desperate. For a long moment, they just breathed together, fog swirling around them, sirens fading into the distance. "Clear to move," Rocco's voice came through the comms. "Vehicles ready." The ride back to the safe house was silent. Maeve's hands had started shaking as the adrenaline wore off. Caleb kept one arm around her shoulders, his other hand on his phone as he coordinated cleanup teams. Inside, Molly was waiting with the secured footage. "Got everything," she reported. "Grant's face, voice, the whole meeting, plus his hired gun taking first shot. Ironclad proof of attempted murder." "Copy it," Caleb ordered. "Triple redundancy, then get some sleep." When Molly left, the silence felt heavier. Maeve stood in the middle of the living room, suddenly uncertain. The night's events seemed to press in around her, the fog, the gunshots, the look in Caleb's eyes when he'd talked about his family. "Shower," he said quietly, "then bed. Everything else can wait until morning." The hot water helped, but Maeve's nerves still hummed. When she came out, Caleb was sitting on the bed, head in his hands. He'd stripped down to black boxer briefs, and she could see the tension knotted in his shoulders. Without speaking, she knelt behind him and wrapped her arms around his chest. He exhaled sharply, one hand coming up to grip her forearm. "I can't lose anyone else," he said, so low she almost missed it. "You won't." She pressed her forehead between his shoulder blades. "I chose this. I chose you." He turned, gathering her into his lap. His kiss was desperate, claiming, like he needed to prove she was real. Maeve met him with equal force, pushing everything she couldn't say into the press of her lips. They fell back together, limbs tangled, hearts racing for better reasons now. Sleep came slowly, in fits and starts, until exhaustion finally won out. The last thing Maeve remembered was Caleb's arm tight around her waist, his breath warm against her neck, both of them alive and whole in the quiet dark. Outside, the city lights glowed through lingering fog. Inside, two people who'd been broken in different ways held onto each other and finally slept. Maeve stared at her phone's calendar, counting the days again. Her heart skipped as the math became clear. The hormone suppressant should have cleared her system last week. After years of Grant controlling her fertility through doctors and medications, the possibility felt both terrifying and wonderful. She waited until Caleb left for his morning briefing. Before calling the concierge, "I need 2 pregnancy tests, the most accurate ones, delivered discreetly." Her voice barely shook. While waiting, she paced the safe house, one hand pressed to her stomach. Everything felt different now. The morning nausea she'd blamed on stress, the tenderness in her breasts, the bone-deep exhaustion. Caleb burst in around 10, his face tight with controlled fury. "We have a leak!" He spread surveillance photos across the kitchen island. Too many close calls. The river terminal, the service corridor breach, someone's feeding our movements. Maeve watched him plant false information through different channels, each location tagged with a unique digital signature. "How long until we know?" "Hours, maybe less." His phone pinged at noon. The GPS trace from a burner phone had pinged one of the fake locations. Caleb's expression darkened as he read the name. "Thomas Valley." "Your underboss." Maeve had met him briefly. Charming smile, expensive watch, eyes that never quite settled. "I pulled him off the streets when he was 17. Caleb's voice was cold. "Gave him everything." Maeve slipped away to the bathroom with one of the tests, hands trembling as she followed the instructions. 3 minutes. She set a timer and waited, perched on the edge of the tub. The bathroom door creaked. Maeve whirled, heart hammering, but it wasn't Caleb. Thomas stood in the doorway, something small and blinking in his hand. "Don't scream," he said quietly. He moved to place the device, a tracker, near her coat, hanging on the door hook. Maeve forced herself to breathe normally. She needed to keep him here until help arrived. "How much did Grant offer you?" Tomas's smile was bitter. "Enough to disappear. Start fresh somewhere warm." "And you believe him?" She edged toward the door, blocking his exit. "Grant doesn't pay people off. He buries them." "Maybe, but staying means watching Caleb throw everything away for you." Tomas's face twisted. The empire he built, the respect we earned, all of it at risk because he can't think straight around you. "Is that what Grant told you?" Maeve's voice stayed steady, even as her pulse raced. "That I'm destroying Caleb's organization? I've seen it myself. The man I knew wouldn't hide in safe houses, wouldn't waste resources protecting one woman." "The man you knew was alone," Maeve countered. Maybe he's not throwing anything away. Maybe he's finally building something real. Heavy footsteps approached. Rocco appeared behind Thomas, gun pressed to his spine. Inside, now. Under intense questioning, Thomas broke. Grant had offered him $2 million in an offshore account. More damning, he revealed Grant's latest plan. A fertility specialist was preparing falsified medical records, showing Maeve had undergone voluntary sterilization years ago, planning to release them to destroy her credibility. The ultimate gaslighting, Maeve said numbly. Make everyone think I chose to be childless, then lied about it. Caleb's expression promised violence. Where are these records? Private clinic on Madison. Dr. Reeves. Thomas slumped in his chair. The release is scheduled for Monday. Maeve retreated to the bathroom while Caleb and Rocco secured Thomas in a soundproof room. Her timer had long since expired. With shaking hands, she checked the test. 2 pink lines. She stared at them until they blurred. After everything, the forced medications, the lies, the control, here was truth in 2 simple lines. But she needed to be certain before telling Caleb. One false positive could shatter them both. She hid the positive test in her pocket and placed the second one on the vanity for morning. Through the wall, she could hear Caleb and Rocco discussing Tomas's fate. He knows too much to walk away, Rocco said. But killing him creates questions we don't need right now. We use him, Caleb decided. Feed bad intel back through him. Let Grant think he still has an inside track. Maeve pressed a hand to her stomach, hope and fear warring in her chest. Beyond the bathroom, she could hear the sounds of Thomas being secured. Chains on a metal chair, locks engaging, guards taking position. She thought of the baby that might be growing inside her, a life created in defiance of all Grant's careful controls. A child who would be born into this dangerous, beautiful world, Caleb commanded. Their child. But first, she needed certainty. Morning would bring answers, one way or another. She emerged to find Caleb standing at the window, tension rigid in his shoulders. You should rest, he said without turning. Tomorrow will be complicated. We should both rest, she replied, taking his hand. If the second test confirmed what she suspected, everything would change. But for now, she held her secret close, protected like the precious possibility it was. They fell asleep with his hand splayed across her stomach, unknowingly guarding their future. Outside, the city lights painted patterns on the ceiling as midnight approached. In the soundproof room below, Thomas sat chained and alone, his betrayal buying him a cold metal chair instead of the warm beaches he'd dreamed of. The second pink line appeared before Maeve finished counting to 60. She stared at the test, heart thundering against her ribs, as that second line darkened with absolute certainty. A laugh bubbled up, half sob, and she pressed her fingers to her lips. Proof. Undeniable, chemical, scientific proof. The cold bathroom tile steadied her as she sank down, test clutched to your chest. Tears spilled free, not the bitter ones Grant had caused, but pure joy. Her body, which he'd tried to control through medication and lies, had reclaimed its power the moment it was free. She splashed cool water on her face, studying her reflection. Same green eyes, same copper hair, but something had shifted. The woman in the mirror looked whole, complete in a way she hadn't been. Since Grant first started weaving his web of medical deception, the hallway to the kitchen felt miles long. Caleb sat at the marble island, frowning over security reports in the morning light. His shoulders were tense, probably still processing Thomas's betrayal. He looked up at her footsteps, dark eyes scanning her face. Maeve's fingers trembled as she laid the test on the counter between them. In 48 hours, she whispered, voice thick with emotion, you gave me back what he stole. Caleb went utterly still. His gaze dropped to the test, then back to her face. The report slipped from his fingers as he stood, chair scraping back. Without a word, he dropped to his knees before her, pressing his forehead to her still flat belly. His hands spanned her hips, steadying them both. Mine to protect, he breathed against her shirt. Both of you. Maeve's fingers threaded through his hair, anchoring herself in the reality of this moment. After months of Grant's gaslighting about her fertility, after believing herself broken, here was truth. Here was hope. They stayed locked together for 10 precious minutes, breathing in sync, letting the magnitude of it wash over them. Caleb's thumbs traced circles on her hips while Maeve's tears dampened his hair. The morning sun painted them in gold through the windows. Finally, Caleb rose, all controlled power again, but his eyes were soft when they met hers. We move now, today. He pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. Molly first. Molly arrived within 20 minutes, laptop already open. Her usual caffeine-fueled energy focused laser-sharp when she saw the test. "Oh, hell yes," she grinned, cracking her knuckles. "Time to lock this down tight." She settled at the kitchen island, establishing secure connections. First priority, authenticating every clinic visit log, every prescription record, every lab result. We're building an ironclad timeline of Grant's medical manipulation. Her fingers flew across the keys. Second priority, establishing your new medical identity. Clean slate, bulletproof background. Rocco arrived as Molly worked, taking in the scene with a slight softening around his eyes. Without comment, he spread building blueprints across the table. 3 primary extraction routes from every location you'll frequent, he explained, marking paths in red. OB clinic, safe house, legal offices, plus 5 backups each. No one touches you. Caleb stood at the window, phone to his ear, voice low and lethal as he set wheels in motion. Not violence, something slower, more complete. Asset freezes, fraud exposures, server seizures, the systematic dismantling of Grant's carefully constructed world of respectable corruption. "I choose ruin for him," he told Maeve when she joined him. "Not blood. Blood ends too quickly." His hand settled protectively over her stomach. "He'll live to see everything he built crumble." Maeve made her own call to a prestigious OB clinic across town, scheduling a first appointment under her new protected identity for the following week. The receptionist's cheerful congratulations brought fresh tears to her eyes. When she hung up, she found Caleb watching her with naked devotion. He'd killed for less than what Grant had done to her, but she'd asked for justice instead of vengeance, and he was honoring that choice. "Ready?" he asked softly. They had legal groundwork to lay: identity protections, trust restructuring, custody firewalls. Maeve took his offered hand, fingers interlacing. "Ready." The private elevator arrived with a soft chime. As they stepped in, Maeve caught their reflection in the polished doors, her small frame tucked against his larger one, his body angled protectively around her, both their hands resting over where their child grew. The doors slid shut on their old life. When they opened again, they would begin writing a new one. Not in blood or lies, but in truth and fierce protection. In 48 hours, everything had changed. In 48 more, they would ensure those changes were permanent. Molly's voice followed them. "I'll have the medical timeline complete when you return." Rocco's response was quieter. "Security routes will be tested and locked down." The elevator descended smoothly, carrying them toward their future. Maeve leaned into Caleb's strength, feeling their child nestled safe between them. Grant had tried to steal her chance at motherhood. Instead, he'd driven her straight to the man who would help her reclaim it. The digital display counted down floors. 15, 14, 13. Maeve touched her stomach, imagining the tiny spark of life there. No more suppression, no more control, no more lies about her body or her choices. She was free, she was pregnant, she was protected. And soon, Grant would learn exactly what it cost to cage someone who was meant to fly. Grant's face filled the wall-mounted screens at the press conference, his expensive suit and practiced, concerned expression a mask for the desperation beneath. Maeve watched from the safe house as he wielded paper props like weapons. "My wife is unwell," he announced, voice dripping with manufactured worry. "She's fallen under the influence of a known criminal element." He held up a folder of doctored psychiatric evaluations. "These assessments show a pattern of instability that makes her particularly vulnerable to manipulation." Caleb's jaw tightened as he stood behind Maeve's chair. On the coffee table, Molly's laptop tracked social media explosion in real time as Grant's carefully orchestrated character assassination spread. "Predator," whispered through comment threads. "Unstable," echoed across news tickers. "CPS monitoring, likely," suggested paid influencer accounts. Maeve's phone buzzed with concerned texts from old acquaintances, Grant's first wave of social pressure. Her hands shook until Caleb's steady fingers covered hers. The breaking news, ticker interrupted. Fire at a luxury apartment complex. Maeve recognized her old building, flames licking up the precise floors where her personal records had been stored. Grant's timing was immaculate, evidence burning while he played concerned husband. "We need to move," Rocco announced, checking his phone. "Route's been compromised." They moved fast, bags packed in 3 minutes, convoy assembled in 5. Maeve settled into the lead SUV with Caleb while Rocco coordinated through comms. The city blurred past rain-slick windows. The attack came at the intersection of 32nd and Madison. A delivery truck T-boned the middle vehicle, splitting their convoy. As Rocco's team engaged with emerging hostiles, a second crash boxed in their SUV. "Secondary exit," Caleb ordered, already moving. But the practiced escape plan fractured as more vehicles appeared, forcing them to separate. Maeve found herself hustled into a decoy sedan with one of Rocco's drivers while Caleb drew fire in the opposite direction. "Keep her moving," crackled his voice through comms. "Circle pattern until clear." The sedan slipped through side streets as Maeve's heart thundered. A burner phone sat in the console, their emergency protocol. She grabbed it, fingers flying across unfamiliar keys to send Molly their agreed distress code. But instead of following the circle pattern, Maeve made a decision. "Take me to the Whitaker building," she told the driver. "Ma'am, that's not the plan." "It's exactly the plan," she said firmly. "I'm done running. He wants to paint me as unstable. Let's see how stable he looks when I walk straight through his front door." The driver hesitated, then nodded. They turned toward the financial district's gleaming towers. Maeve used the burner to text Molly again. "Following the fear home. Trace this." Grant's building loomed, all glass and steel arrogance. Maeve stepped out of the sedan, spine straight. The lobby security recognized her. They'd seen her pass through countless times as Mrs. Whitaker. Their uncertainty at stopping her gave her the seconds needed to reach the main floor. Grant emerged from the elevator bank, his press conference mask cracking at the sight of her. Without his cameras and cronies, he seemed smaller, desperate. He crossed the marble floor in quick strides, grabbing her wrist. "You stupid girl," he hissed. "Sign the transfer, now, before you embarrass yourself further." Maeve looked at his fingers digging into her skin. "Let go." "You'll sign," he growled. "Or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly how unstable you are. No judge will let an unstable woman keep a child." A small red dot appeared on his chest, steady, unwavering. Caleb's promise made visible through a sniper's scope from somewhere in the buildings opposite. Grant followed Maeve's gaze down to the laser sight, and his face went slack. "You really think I came alone?" Maeve asked quietly. The lobby doors opened, admitting uniformed officers. They moved with purpose, warrant, folders in hand. Behind them came tech crime unit members, carrying Molly's carefully assembled evidence, medical records, bank transfers, surveillance footage. Grant's fingers went slack on her wrist. The red dot remained steady on his chest as his carefully constructed world began to crumble. Maeve stepped back, one hand protectively over her stomach. She thought of the baby growing there, the child Grant had tried to prevent, then tried to use as leverage. She thought of Caleb kneeling before her that morning, promising protection. She thought of Molly's fierce data gathering and Rocco's extraction routes and all the people who had helped her stand here now. The officers approached Grant, warrant extended. Through the lobby's glass walls, Maeve saw news vans arriving, drawn by Molly's anonymous tips about corruption at the prestigious Whitaker firm. Grant's own press conference would be overshadowed by his arrest. More police entered through side doors. The laser sight remained unwavering. Caleb's silent reminder that he had eyes on the situation, that she wasn't alone. The tech crimes unit began setting up their equipment, preparing to seize servers. A female detective approached Maeve with a notepad, ready to take her statement about the medical manipulation. 6 minutes had passed since she'd entered the lobby. In 6 minutes, she'd broken the power Grant held over her. In 6 minutes, she'd chosen to face her fear instead of running from it. The lobby clock read 6:12 p.m. Time seemed to slow as the officers moved toward Grant. His face twisted with fury as he realized his carefully constructed facade was about to shatter. The laser sight on his chest promised consequences if he moved wrong. Maeve watched it all unfold, one hand still resting on her stomach. She felt the future shift, realigning itself around this moment of truth. The pincer movement snapped shut like precision clockwork. While uniformed officers secured the lobby, Molly's data bomb detonated across media channels. The authentic clinic logs hit a veteran healthcare reporter's inbox with timestamps, signatures, and damning phrases like hormone suppression administered per spouse request, highlighted in sickening yellow. Upstairs, in the Whitaker firm's gleaming boardroom, Rocco materialized with Thomas in tow. The underboss trembled, wired and pale, as board members shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. His confession spilled out in a rush. How Grant had bought his betrayal, promised him clean papers and offshore accounts to help frame Maeve as unstable. "He said it was just business," Tomas stammered. "Get her declared unfit, seize the trust, everyone profits." The boardroom's mahogany walls seemed to close in as Caleb's tech team simultaneously breached the shipping line servers. Numbers cascaded across screens, wire transfers, shell companies, cartel funds flowing through legitimate channels. Grant's careful house of cards collapsed in real time. Grant's face went from red to white as his phone exploded with alerts, emergency court orders freezing assets, the medical board launching an investigation, former allies suddenly remembering damning details for the cameras. He bolted from the boardroom, shoving past startled executives. Security cameras tracked his desperate flight through the building's back corridors toward the riverfront gala where the city's elite pretended nothing was wrong. The footage showed him drawing a gun with shaking hands as he burst into the service entrance. String lights swayed overhead, casting shifting shadows across polished floors where waiters had been preparing to serve champagne. Now they scattered as Grant stumbled through, weapons swinging wildly. He made it as far as the loading dock before Caleb's measured footsteps echoed behind him. "You lied about her body!" Caleb's voice was ice cold in the humid evening air. "So I'll carve the lie out of your empire." Grant spun, gun wavering. Through the dock's open doors, gala guests in evening wear pressed against windows, phones recording. No one moved to help him. The mighty Grant Whitaker stood alone, his carefully constructed world dissolving like sugar in rain. "She's mine," Grant snarled. "The trust is mine. You can't." "Already done," Caleb cut him off. "Your specialist is suspended. Your accounts are frozen. Your partners are talking." "And Maeve?" His smile was razor sharp. "She was never yours to cage." The gun clattered from Grant's trembling fingers. For a moment, silence hung heavy as the summer air. Then Grant lunged for the weapon with a broken cry. Maeve stepped out of the shadows, her movements calm and precise, her hand connected with the gun, sending it skittering across concrete before Grant's fingers could close around it. She'd walked through fire to stand here. She wouldn't let him threaten what she'd built. Police swarmed the loading dock, cuffs glinting in the string lights. As they led Grant away, he shouted Maeve's name like a spell that had lost its power. She watched him go, one hand resting protectively over her stomach, the other finding Caleb's steady grip. The gala's string lights swayed gently overhead, casting soft patterns across their faces. Sirens faded into the distance. It was 8:02 p.m., and the war was over. The next 14 days unfolded like a dream becoming real. Grant's bail hearing ended with him remanded to custody. Flight risk, the judge said, given his offshore accounts and attempted trust seizure. The medical board suspended the fertility specialist pending a full investigation into falsified records and coerced treatment. News outlets ran retractions, their legal departments sweating as Molly's evidence proved every lie. Maeve and Caleb moved quietly into a temporary penthouse, somewhere between his world and hers. The space felt like a cocoon, high enough to see the city lights, secure enough to finally breathe. They turned one room into a nursery in waiting, though they bought nothing yet. Just stood in the empty space, imagining. Her first prenatal appointment came on a Wednesday morning. The doctor's office was warm, professional, chosen by Molly for its sterling reputation and ironclad privacy policies. Maeve lay back on crinkly paper, Caleb's hand steady in hers as the technician spread cool gel across her stomach. The heartbeat filled the room, strong, fast, defiant. Caleb's fingers tightened around hers. Maeve watched his face as he stared at the grainy screen, saw the moment the tiny flutter of life became real to him. His eyes softened in a way she'd never seen before. "Everything looks perfect," the doctor said, but they barely heard her. They were lost in the sound of that heartbeat, in the proof that love could grow even in the darkest places. Later, they stood at the penthouse windows, watching the city shift from day to night. The ultrasound photo sat on the counter behind them, their first family portrait. Maeve leaned back against Caleb's chest, his arms wrapped protectively around her, his hands spanning her still flat stomach. The past 14 days had transformed their world. Grant's empire crumbled, brick by corrupt brick. The truth emerged, sharp and clean as sunrise. And here they stood, watching the lights come on across the city, their future unfurling before them like a road paved in starlight. Morning light filtered through the clinic's windows, casting soft shadows across the examination room. At 7:40 a.m., Maeve lay back on the padded table, her hand clasped in Caleb's as the technician spread cool gel across her abdomen. The sonogram screen flickered to life. A rhythmic whooshing filled the room, their baby's heartbeat, strong and steady. Caleb's customary stillness transformed. His fingers tightened around Maeve's as wonder swept across his face. "There," The technician pointed, smiling. Perfect size for 8 weeks. Everything looks healthy. Maeve watched Caleb more than the screen, memorizing how his sharp edges softened, how his watchful gaze turned reverent. The man who commanded empires with whispered threats now stood breathless at the sight of something smaller than a grape. "Would you like prints?" the technician asked. "Yes," they answered in unison, making Maeve laugh softly. After collecting their precious photos and scheduling the next appointment, they took the private elevator to the building's roof. Maeve gasped as the doors opened. Overnight, Caleb's crews had transformed the space into a garden. Wooden planters overflowed with white flowers, creating a short aisle. String lights hung like captured stars, swaying gently in the morning breeze. Molly waited near a silver-haired justice of the peace, practically bouncing with excitement in a blue dress. Rocco stood beside her, his usual tactical gear replaced by a dark suit, though Maeve noticed he still scanned the perimeter out of habit. "You planned this?" Maeve whispered, to Caleb, squeezing his hand. "The moment you showed me the test," he admitted. "If you want something different—" She silenced him with a kiss. "It's perfect." The ceremony was simple, intimate, and entirely theirs. Sunlight caught the edge of the city skyline as they faced each other. Caleb's vows came first, his voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. "I vow violence for those who threaten you, and worship for every breath you take. My empire exists to protect you. My strength is yours to command. Every kingdom I've built, I lay at your feet. But the greatest gift you've given me is the chance to be gentle." Tears pricked Maeve's eyes as she spoke her own vows. "I vow to challenge you when you need it, to trust you when it matters most. I'll love both sides of you, the man who ends kings and the man who will rock our child to sleep. You gave me back my voice, my strength, my future. I choose you today and always." The justice nodded to Rocco, who produced 2 simple platinum bands. Caleb slid Maeve's ring onto her finger, covering the last fading indent from her old ring. The metal felt different, lighter, like a promise instead of a cage. She placed his ring with steady hands, sealing their vows. "By the power vested in me," the justice smiled, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Their kiss tasted of morning light and new beginnings. The city stretched below them, waking to another Monday while their world realigned itself on its axis. Molly wiped her eyes, then checked her phone. "Oh, perfect timing! Grant's indictment just dropped. 15 counts, including conspiracy and fraud. The shipping line's been seized pending investigation." She grinned wickedly. "And the medical board just reinstated the clinic's correct records. The specialist's license is suspended indefinitely." "Excellent work," Caleb told her, but his eyes never left Maeve's face. They spent the day handling necessary paperwork, marriage license, name change forms, trust reinstatement documents. Molly had everything prepared, requiring only signatures and timestamps. Through it all, Caleb kept one hand on Maeve, at her lower back, linked with her fingers, brushing her hair from her face. Evening found them in their penthouse, city lights twinkling beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. Maeve curled against Caleb's chest on their bed, his hand spread protectively over her abdomen where their child grew. The sonogram photo sat framed on the nightstand, their first family portrait in grainy black and white. "You're mine," Caleb whispered into her hair as she drifted toward sleep. "Forever." For the first time in her life, the word mine felt like safety instead of possession. It meant protection, not control. It was a promise of shelter, not a claim of ownership. Maeve covered his hand with hers, feeling the solid weight of his new ring against her palm. Outside their windows, the city breathed its nighttime rhythm. Inside, they had built something rare and precious, an empire founded on iron and devotion, with danger at its edges but love at its core. Sleep pulled at her consciousness as Caleb's heartbeat steadied beneath her ear. His breath evening out told her he was following her into dreams, his guard lowered only here, only with her. The last thing she felt was his hand tightening slightly over their growing child, a silent promise of protection. Tomorrow would bring nursery plans and legal formalities. They would face 1,000 small, ordinary choices that would shape their extraordinary life together. But for now, in this moment between sunset and dreams, they simply existed in the peace they had fought so hard to win.